This book, The American Plague, The Untold Story of Yellow Fever, the epidemic that shaped our history, written by Molly Caldwell Crosby, provided first-hand experiences and stories of the yellow fever. In 1878, the yellow fever was first gaining its name. No one knows how the yellow fever came to be or how the new life form emerged. However, there was eventually a discovery in the depths of Cuba. In the 1880s, Memphis had a booming harbor. Many boats brought imported goods. However, these boats carried the American plague, a sickening disease that would weaken anything. As the time progressed, everyone knew someone who was being affected by the yellow fever, if not directly affected themselves. Soon, the Board of Health declared a yellow fever epidemic in Memphis. Molly Caldwell Crosby assessed many historical documents to learn how the yellow fever attacked humans. Once lively people, the yellow fever could take down anyone. Headaches, black vomit, aches and pains, fatigue, and loss of appetite is just an understatement for how aggressive the American plague actually is. On a mission to find the cure for the Yellow Fever Board sent Walter Reed, Jesse Lazier, James Carroll, Aristides Agramonte, and Carlos Finlay to Cuba in 1900 to find the cause of this deadly epidemic. In Cuba, Agramonte performed autopsies on fever cadavers. In Havana, Carroll compared and contrasted different tissue samples at Camp Columbia, and Lazier started to conduct an experiment on mosquitoes all to find the cure. Finlay and Lazier examined Aedes aegypti mosquitoes to support the mosquito theory. That was, that mosquitoes were the cause of the fever. As the other team members, such as Reed, Carroll, Agramonte, and Finlay, got distracted in their own work, Lazier was left to test the mosquito theory. Lazier carried test tubes of mosquitoes that had bitten different yellow fever victims. To test his theory, Lazier let the infected mosquito feed on his arm and other volunteers. However, no one contracted the yellow fever virus. Lazier was discouraged until the prey turned on the predator. A mosquito that had fed on a patient 12 days before felt weak and refused to eat. James Carroll seemed to think the mosquito theory was useless, so he let the ill mosquito feed off of his arm. Soon the mosquito was thriving again, but 3 days later, Carroll became ill. Another patient, patient XY, volunteered himself to be bitten by the mosquito. Several days later, patient XY became the second known case of experimental yellow fever. While conducting further experiments, Lazier became sick with the yellow fever, and soon the yellow fever took another life. To conduct further experiments more successfully, Reed launched a new camp called Camp Lazier. At this time, a new theory was being experimented, the germ theory. The germ theory claimed the yellow fever was being transmitted through germs, air, or other infected items. When this theory was tested, numerous volunteers dressed in infected clothing for 20 days. When none of the volunteers developed the fever, the theory was soon diminished. But the mosquito theory continued to thrive. Walter Reed, with the help of the late Jesse Lazier, was able to prove that mosquitoes were the binding cause of the yellow fever. Numerous volunteers became infected with the yellow fever, proving his theory. The riddle was finally solved. Walter Reed and Jesse Lazier found the solution to the yellow fever virus. This deadly virus spreads from cell to cell until it takes over an entire human. Once the virus has entered the bloodstream, it is entwined with the DNA or the RNA to create terrifying symptoms and progress the virus further. Scientists didn't know how to stop the disease or how to cure it. Millions of Americans died and lost loved ones due to the yellow fever epidemic. However, a new vaccine was created to prevent this deadly plague. Max Thieler spent years dedicated to finding the bacteria that caused the yellow fever. To develop the vaccine, Thieler combined infected mouse brain tissue with blood from a human immune to yellow fever. Thieler injected the combination into a patient, and the patient developed immunity to the fever. Max Thieler developed the 17D vaccine known for combating yellow fever. The yellow fever still plagues many Africans and South Americans even with the development of a vaccine. The vaccine is no longer in regular vaccine schedules, causing many deaths in other parts of the world. Molly Caldwell Crosby supports the book's information through thorough research. She assessed many historical documents to support the book. She took notes from diaries and personal experiences to make the American plague factual. Throughout this book, Crosby was thoroughly passionate to display the effects and outcomes of the yellow fever. She created a descriptive nonfiction story to support the premise. In the 1900s, numerous theories were being researched, creating controversy. Different scientists were competing against each other to find the cure. For some people, it was hard to grasp the idea that something so extreme was being spread by a mosquito. This year, ninth grade students study oceanography, and more specifically, El Nino. The yellow fever is thought to have grown so quickly because of an El Nino season. Hot, humid conditions created a perfect breeding environment for mosquitoes. One of the members of the Yellow Fever Board, Jesse Lazier, had been trying to prove the mosquito theory. After years of practice and dedication towards this deadly disease, the disease took Lazier as well. He never got to finish his work or prove his theory because the yellow fever took his own life. However, he did contribute greatly to the cure for the fever. After reading this book, I learned how the yellow fever shaped our society and history. Some counties were quarantined, often affecting a whole country, therefore affecting society. This epidemic played such a big role at the turn of the century since it affected millions of lives. Because the yellow fever vaccine is no longer enforced in regular vaccine schedules, up to 30,000 people are still dying because of the fever in other parts of the world. This could create negative long-term effects because of possible epidemics. If people were still treated with the 17D vaccine, other yellow fever epidemics could be prevented. Overall, I really enjoyed the book. Molly Caldwell Crosby did a nice job of describing historical events in a scientific point of view. She did a nice job of stringing together narratives to create an accurate nonfiction novel.